he worked at the marketing company that I got hired by. It was my first full-time job. Literally on the first day, I meet him in like the bathroom and I like introduced myself. I was like, did you wash your hands? I was just looking at this very, very awkward. Why is it called a cold open anyway? Just it's not like heating up in the oven. Is that why? Like,
there's a story behind it, I think, but I don't know it enough. And this is the thing, if I try to like think that I know it and I say it incorrectly, there's way more backlash of me saying something completely wrong than there would be for me to maybe be right about the background of the cold open, you know?
Yeah, I wish it was called something different, to be honest, because I like the idea of like you hop in, you just kind of start shooting from the hip, kind of like how I do a lot of my fantasy rankings sometimes when you have these ambiguous backfields where you're not really sure what you're doing with them.
Yeah.
And we get these BS reports about so-and-so is going to be the starter, and then they're not the starter. So yeah, just classic fantasy stuff.
A quick Google search says a cold open is called that because it throws the audience directly into the action without any warm-up, such as an opening credit sequence or introduction. So it's the most intuitive reason imaginable as to why it's called a cold open.
Yeah. So it does actually kind of make sense.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
It's like, okay.
I was thinking every time someone hops on, I say this every week, but I'm like, okay, let's think about like you guys, you're going to talk about your background a little bit. And I'm going to think about like, when we've crossed paths and stuff like that. I think we met a really long time ago, like in Vegas, didn't we? I remember you sitting at a bar at one point at a Vegas FSGA, and I met you. I remember meeting you, and I think Ratcliffe was with us, and it was just a brief conversation when I first originally like had met you IRL. But I realized also like look, I've been in the space for a while. Like it's to the point where I've gone from being the young guy to the unk, as the kids say. I'm unk now, right? Isn't that what Zoomers say these days? But you've been around for a minute too, despite you being younger than the unk on this today's show.
Yeah, I don't feel like that though. I feel like I could still, hang out with the kids as I like to say, but I am 31 now, so it's really not the case anymore. And I guess I have been, I don't know how many years I've been doing this full time. I think this is my third year at FantasyPros after I spent 3 years at PFF full time. And before that, it was like freelancing several different places and trying to kind of find my way in the industry. It feels good that I'm viewed in that capacity where it's like, do I have clout now? Like, is this like a thing?
I mean, look, you've been around. Here's the dirty little secret though. People listen to this show, and they might be in their early 20s or something like that. And they're like, oh, JJ's, he's got a family, he's got kids, like he's a dad and like, all that. Trust me, guys, I feel no different today really than I did. The only difference between I feel today versus when I was like 23, 24 years old is that, I think that I'm more mature and like I have like a different worldview and stuff like that. But like, it's just like recovering from like drinking alcohol and exercising, like it's just that kind of stuff is just a little bit different. I don't really feel that old, it's not really that different, but I'm unk. You're almost unk at this point.
Yeah, no, I can definitely co-sign on the recovery thing though. Like the minute that I turned 30, it was like my body took so much longer to recover from workouts. I can't even do half the workouts I used to do in my early 20s when I was just doing absolute insane things on very, very little sleep, a lot of caffeine. And I don't know how I was able to function at like a normal level based on what I was actually doing on a day-to-day basis. If I had told someone like, oh yeah, this is like what I do. Like I sleep like 4 to 5 hours, drink a ton of pre-workout, work out all the time, 7 days a week. I can't even go exercise like lifting weights, probably back-to-back days. I need at least like a couple of days in between.
Yeah.
And so that's what happens when you get old.
Yeah. And then there's gonna be a 60-year-old listening to this, 70-year-old listening to this being like, you guys have no idea what's about to come. You've no clue what's about to hit. But yeah, I think that the number one thing that I found with like exercise and stuff is that you can't compare to your previous self because it's just the most demoralizing on earth. Like you just gotta stay as healthy as you can. You gotta work out as much as you can and just realize that this is the body that you have now. This is the age that you are now. Don't compare to your lifts or your 5K times or 10K times when you were, 23 years old.
Yeah. I think too, putting in perspective of later on perspectives. So,
there we go.
A key for you. Putting into perspective of what your goals are now, which are very, very different in terms of what is important to you.
Right.
Why am I exercising?
Right.
Now it's about, I just want to feel good.
Yeah. Longevity.
I want to exercise to not get tired, but exercise to help me wake up in the morning or give me energy, provide me with energy. So where it used to be, 10 years ago, I go to the gym. All right. What am I going to annihilate today?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Exactly.
It's like you're on a mission
my body.
to destroy your body. Now it's like, I just want to get this over with. I just want to be healthy.
Yeah.
That's my new goal. So yeah.
And
so for those that you are, if you're in your 20s, teens, whatever, and you're lifting, you feel good, keep it up.
Create that foundation for sure. Let's talk about your background a little bit. You mentioned, you're at FantasyPros obviously right now. You were at PFF for a while. How'd you get into all of this craziness to begin with?
Yeah, so lifelong football fan. Started playing fantasy football when I was in middle school. Fell in love with it. Played it throughout high school, college, and then after graduated from college, looking for a job. Part of me really wanted to do some fantasy, writing. And I got a start at Gridiron Experts under Mike Riggs. There's actually a lot of industry people that did start at Gridiron Experts. Matt Harmon actually wrote for Gridiron Experts.
I don't think I even realized that. Yeah.
Yep.
I know
it was, so that's where I got my start. It was actually Mitchell Renz, who works for Chat Sports now. He worked at the marketing company that I got hired by. It was my first full-time job. Literally on the first day, I meet him in the bathroom. And I introduced myself. I was like, did you wash your hands? It was just this very, very awkward, very, very awkward. But he kind of pulled the curtain on, hey, you want to see something cool? Here's fantasy football Twitter. It's like, whoa, this is crazy. And maybe he shouldn't have showed it to me. Maybe I would have been better off if he hadn't showed it to me. But it really got me exposed to, hey, this community of fantasy football. And I ended up writing for Gridiron Experts, picked up a couple other gigs here and there. Fantasy Data was another place that I started doing stuff part-time. And eventually I came to a conclusion in my mind that at the time, it's 23 years old. Hey, I want to try to pursue this as a career. Mm-hmm. Right now, I don't have a lot of responsibilities besides just, hey, I have a full-time job, saving up some money, but I don't have a house, don't have kids, don't have a wife, any of those things. It's hey, let's go for this. This is going to be my only chance because it's going to be a lot harder to do it in 10 years when I'm 30, 35 years old. So I start going to these events, like you mentioned before, FSGA. Yep. Those are things that I went to. I ended up going to the NFL draft. I think it was the one that was in Nashville. Kyler Murray was the quarterback drafted that year. I don't remember the exact year it was. 2017, I think 2017 or 2018. And that's where I met a lot of the FantasyPros team. I got to meet Mike Tagliere for the very first time at the NFL draft. And I just basically asked him, hey, what do I need to do to get into this space? And he offered a lot of really good wisdom and advice about, hey, you just got to want it, go after it, be hungry, and continue to pursue and put yourself into positions and kind of make yourself lucky. No one's just going to give you a job. Yeah. It's about networking like it is with any other type of job that you try to get. Every job I've gotten, full-time, high school, whatever, it's been, well, you have the requisite skill set to do said job, but who do you know here? And that's how I got it. And with getting the first full-time job at PFF, you mentioned him, Jeff Ratcliffe. I struck up a conversation with him. I think I get the FSGAs and expos kind of mixed up sometimes. Yeah, I know where it was, but it was at a Buffalo Wild Wings in Canton, Ohio, when I met Jeff Ratcliffe. And at the time, I was doing charting for PFF. So I knew Ratcliffe because he did the PFF show, and he obviously had been PFF for so many years. So I was like, hey, I'm just going to talk to him and be like, oh, yeah, I do the player participation for PFF. So just an easy way to strike up a conversation. And we networked. I gave him my business card that I printed off on PowerPoint like a day or two before that I just made makeshift. So right, if I meet people, I gotta give them something. So I did that all on my own. And again, at the time, it's not like you talk to them and they go, all right, well, you're hired. It doesn't work that way. But I at least kind of put myself into the pool of, okay, if there's ever an opportunity, hey, at least I'll be one of the candidates that they'll consider.
Yeah.
And then there ended up being an opening at PFF where, hey, Jeff Ratcliffe really kind of like stuck his neck out for me to, hey, let's bring this kid in. I really like what he can offer. And unfortunately, we only overlapped for like a week because then immediately after I got hired, he moved on to FTN, which he always tells me that wasn't part of the plan. That he was like, I didn't leave right after we hired you just because it just worked out that way. Now, luckily, I got to work with a bunch of really great people at PFF.
Right.
Ian Hart, Sway McFarland, Nathan Yonke, who's still at PFF. So a lot of great people I got to work with there. But yeah, that's really how I got my start. And when people usually ask me for advice about, how do I break into this space? I think the easy answer is always, well, if you come up with like a really great idea, like that'll work really well, just because there is a lot of oversaturation. That's easier said than done, of course, because even I don't think I've come up with something so innovative that it's just going to take the world by storm.
Right.
So the alternative is make sure that you're already doing the work, you're getting the reps in, you're recording a podcast, you're writing articles. Nobody can read them, nobody can listen to them, but you're getting better every single time you do them. So by the time that an opportunity does come, you'll be ready to take it head on, and you already have kind of a profile of things that you can kind of show what you've been doing. And the second thing is to network. Put yourself into situations to get lucky. You can stand behind your laptop sending out resumes. That just doesn't really work. Yeah. What you have to do is kind of go to these conferences. Like that's the number one thing. I said, hey, when's the next FSGA? Go to the Fantasy Football Expo. This is how you build these connections with people. And yes, they don't offer you a job right on the spot, but it's something later comes down the line. They remember, oh yeah, I remember talking to so-and-so. Yeah. I made it at kind of a point where I would show up to so many of these things and I would introduce myself to the same people over and over again. And eventually I'm like, they're just going to remember me as the kid that always shows up and always introduces themselves to me, even if I have nothing to offer them at that time. So that's something that, my parents have always kind of taught me to do, is like, always be remembered for the right reasons. And that has kind of stuck with me. So I would say that how I got to where I was, again, a lot of people helped me along the way, getting lucky, working hard, some of the more cliche things, but just kind of going after it, head first and really being determined. So that's kind of how I ended up getting here. And again, going from PFF to FantasyPros. Again, Joe Pisapia was someone that I worked with closely on a couple of different projects, did some hit spots with him at Sports Grid when I was at PFF, and he really enjoyed working with me. And he's the one that kind of recruited me to go over to FantasyPros. And now I couldn't be happier with the team we have. Pat Fitzmaurice, Chris Welch, Derek Brown, Joe, all the great guys over there, and girls, of course. So yeah, I'm just happy to be part of it, to be honest. Like, it's a great gig to have. Never try to take it for granted. So when I'm tired or get frustrated about, man, like I'm so bad at running this player, it's like, hey, at the end of the day, it's fantasy football. You're doing the best you can.
Yeah. I mean, a couple of things. I mean, number one, I actually had a conversation with my wife last night where I'm like, I can't complain about my job to anyone because that would be ridiculous, because it's such a great job in the grand scheme of things. I mean, everyone hits bumps and like there are things you get frustrated with, but like, I feel so lucky, similar to what you were just saying. I feel so lucky to be able to do this that I want to keep my seat at the table. And that reminds me of just like what Tags taught folks. Like that was the thing that resonated with me all the time, is that he was just so grateful to just like have the gig and be part of it and be part of that experience. It's really cool that you got to meet him and then ended up at FantasyPros after he had passed. So that's cool that you were able to meet him and talk to him, because he was an awesome dude. Really, really awesome guy.
Yeah, no, he was someone that I think about when I'm always kind of in a pinch when it comes to some of this stuff. And even before I worked at FantasyPros or even like PFF, I would go to him about like questions about what it's like to have a job in this space. I asked him questions about like salary. Like it's like one of the weirdest. You can't just Google like, what does a fantasy football analyst make? It's very, very weird. But if this is something that is your livelihood, it's something that you have to have the conversation with. Like explaining to my wife or girlfriend at the time is like, okay, like, well, this is my job. So like, this is how it works. She's like, so you're going to get paid to do this, right? Like, yes, I am. Yeah. So going through those things, and Tags had obviously been, so experienced in this space. He was someone that he offered his guidance to me, as someone that I was just so grateful that he would reach out and check on how I was doing, and obviously gutted by, what ended up happening to Tags. But it's a reminder that we try to at FantasyPros, again, no one can ever replace, what he meant to fantasy, his family, his friends. But everything that we do, I always try to think like, hey, do it the Tags way, all out, best effort you can, and be proud of your work. So, and again, I mean, and I think Derek has done such a great job with the primer, filling in the shoes for Tagley, because that thing is just an absolute monster. And I know Derek doesn't sometimes get enough love, I think, for it, because I mean, the dude doesn't sleep like during the week. Like,
I mean, I don't know how. I remember when Tags first started doing it, and I think I messaged him, and I'm like, "You're a maniac! Like, you're insane for doing this." Like it's crazy. It's a beast of a content.
It's totally crazy, and it's overkill, but like that's why we love it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's so overkill.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about some fantasy football a little bit here. So far this season, what to you has been the biggest surprise?
I think for me, it's Javonte Williams kind of hitting this renaissance. Running back that was really great at coming out as a prospect. We saw a lot of flashes from him. There was the Javonte Williams versus Melvin Gordon offseason battles. Who could forget those long debates? You get that one game where Javonte plays, Gordon's out, he scores like 35 fantasy points. And we're all just like, oh man, like this is like wheels up. He suffers a devastating injury. And usually it's that 1 year, right? That it takes a guy to get back to, okay, if he's ever going to get back, it's going to be 1 year after his injury. And then it just doesn't happen for Javonte. Like, it's like 2 years removed. He's like, okay, like he's still really inefficient. Like he's still really bad. Are we ever going to see Javonte again? And the Broncos pushed him to the side. They don't want him anymore. He signs with Dallas. And we're thinking, okay, like this is your bread and butter when it comes to like, hey, you got to target ambiguous backfields. Sure. Javonte is cheap, but he plays in an offense that we expect to score a lot of points. So I think from like a process standpoint, it made a lot of sense to be in on Javonte to some extent this year, where he wasn't pricey. It was Miles Sanders, who I think a lot of people viewed as like, okay, like if anyone's like completely washed, it's probably more Miles Sanders than Javonte Williams is. Yeah. And then Jaden Blue. It's like explosive pass catching rookie running back, but not someone that profiles as a bell cow in any way, shape, or form. So I just think that Javonte getting the job doesn't necessarily surprise me, but for him to be this effective is kind of the part that surprised me the most. Like any running back can stumble into some touchdowns on a good offense, but not necessarily be efficient, be more of a plotter. But he's checked off every single box in terms of, well, getting bell cow usage, but pass catching, breaking tackles, being efficient. And you look up and you think, this guy's 25, 26 years old. Yeah. Right? Like, is this the beginning of, this is just the start for Javonte, because he just missed so much time with that injury. But so for me, it's definitely Javonte Williams. And again, drafted him a decent amount, but now knowing what I know, I'm like, dude, he should have been an auto click every single time.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. I look back at two of my biggest, and I've mentioned this on the show before, but like, I'm okay with like missing on some some players, because we're going to miss on plenty of players each year, as long as like process was logical and sound when doing it. With Javonte, I was like 4 spots below market in running back rank, right? And I was definitely drafting more Jaden Blue than Javonte, just because I'm such a sucker for the pass catching stuff. And even knowing that Blue was not going to be a bell cow, I even wrote that up whenever I talked about that backfield. But the thing that really annoys me about Javonte is exactly what you're talking about. It's the ambiguous back. Like, I wish I was more overweight. I drafted him in the Kings Classic Snake Draft League. And when I did it, before I announced the pick, I said, I'm about to vomit here, but I'm going to take Javonte Williams. And everyone just started booing me. And like, no one wanted Javonte. Like at that, like that was in like, early-ish August. No one wanted him. And right now my team's sitting in first place, largely because of him, and it's funny too. I had a conversation with Scott Barrett, DM conversation with him. And he messaged me and he goes, who's the one player that you are afraid of being like not having enough of? And my answer, this is back in July. My answer was Javonte Williams. And it's coming back to haunt me. And because of the thing, I just think process wise, like you said, looking back in hindsight, we should have been more in on this, or at least I should have been more in on this. Because I'm not even one that takes running back efficiency metrics and stuff to heart that nearly as much as I would other positions because we know it's so indicative of what's going on in their surroundings and stuff. Offensive line's playing great there for him. Like so many things have broken his way, no doubt. Like this is like a 95th percentile outcome, like let's just be real. But this should have been part of it, more of it, part of his range of outcomes. I'm taking the L on Javonte this year, just from that perspective. It's him. Calvin Ridley was the other one where I was higher on Ridley than the market when every ounce of research that I've done historically that everyone remembers and even hits me up about every year is don't target pass catchers and even running backs that are on teams with rookie quarterbacks. And I ignored it because I was like, he's going to see a high target share. And it was a really, really bad process. And I'm really mad about it. But yeah, I like that call out about Javonte.
Yeah, he's interesting too from a dynasty perspective,
Very,
I think, because he's not that old. So how is the market going to view, again, he's on a 1-year deal. So it does this open opportunity. Does Dallas, okay, he's our running back for the future. Yep. Or is it, no, like, because ever since they paid Zeke, they've been terrified of investing anything in running backs. Right. They're like, no, thank you. Like, we'll just take somebody else, take another guy off the scrap heap. So it'll be interesting to see how Javonte shakes out rest of season. But right now, top 10 running back rest of season. And I think that after he kind of put up a dud this past week, he's a really good guy to try and buy low on.
Yeah. All right. Another question I have is that this is kind of convoluted, but is there anything out there right now in the fantasy football world, the community, where people generally accept something as fact, maybe like an anchoring bias going on where something happened early on in the season? Like, for instance, I talked about this earlier this week, the Chargers offense, not nearly as good as what I think people would believe, right? Like the Chargers offense has scored 2 or fewer offensive touchdowns in every game since week 1. They haven't been near, like they have a below average number of touchdowns offensively scored this year. Are there any like situations, teams, players where you think the market, the consensus is feeling X, but you're like, no, this should be X plus 1 or X minus 1?
So this is one that I wrote down the statistics for this particular team. And as I wrote them, I'm thinking in my mind, are these real? Are these made up stats? Because I still can't believe them. And it has to do with the Panthers and their run defense. So they're third in run defense DVOA this season. Third best.
I had no idea. I had no idea.
It's insane because I could ask anybody about, hey, how do you think the Panthers run defense is? Like, oh, it's probably like the worst in the league.
Right.
Because that's how it always is. Even week 1, Jaguars, Travis Etienne has this like monster game. And you're like, all right, here we go again. Panthers defense sucks. But that's not really been the case. Even last week, I was really high on Javonte. I was like, man, like he's going to smash. I know that Achane had a tough game against the Panthers 2 weeks ago, but Miami, their run game, it can a little be like hit or miss. So that was probably more fluky. But then Javonte goes out, it's like 2.2 yards per carry. I'm like, what is going on here with this Panthers run defense? I'm like digging under the hood a little bit. I'm like, they've allowed 50 rushing yards total the last 2 games. Total. I'm like, what? And then I try and figure out, is there like a certain defensive player they got back that is like causing this like a major impact? The only thing I could find was Pat Jones is an offensive line or an outside linebacker they have. He's been back the last couple weeks, but nothing about his individual stats would suggest that he's like this linchpin defensive player. So I don't really know exactly why they're playing so well, but something has changed and they're playing significantly better against the run. And they actually are getting Treshaun Wharton back this week, a defensive tackle they signed in the offseason who got hurt in the beginning of the year. And we're like, all right, they're going to be terrible again. So I don't think this is nearly the same type of smash spot that, again, I was talking about Breece Hall, I think a couple weeks ago. Buy low, man. Like, he's got the Panthers coming up, Bengals. Like, this is great. And now I'm like, the Jets can't catch a break.
Yeah.
The one thing they can do is run the ball. And now they're facing a improved Panthers run defense. So that is something that really stuck out to me about this Panthers defense just in general. And it kind of also leans into the Fields question about this week. I know a lot of people have questions just because Fields was so bad last week, but he runs. So is he going to be fine? But if there's no passing floor without Garrett Wilson, like I get you want to play Fields. You just trust the spreadsheets. He's going to run. Doesn't matter everything else. But at the same time, I don't know how you feel super, super great about it because we've seen what he does and he doesn't have that fourth quarter spike, especially when it's without Garrett Wilson. You just get really, really concerned. And then when you throw in some of these facts about the Panthers defense, maybe not being as bad overall as we all think, I think that was something that really surprised me.
Yeah, no, that is pretty surprising. That reminds me because like I'm looking at my adjusted fantasy points allowed numbers. This adjusts for strength of opponent. and they're bottom 5 as an opponent to running backs this year, like when adjusted for strength of opponent. And then like this reminds me of I tweeted about this and I talked about it on the 10 Trends episode. Atlanta has been unbelievable defensively this year too. Like Atlanta is literally top 3 against every fantasy position in adjusted points allowed so far this year. You know, like there's stuff like that where, you know, I think that obviously there's going to be some variance and some just like some noise to stuff like this, but it's really easy to just make assumptions about certain matchups and certain things that we do have to gut check at times and like have these moments where we're like, oh, wait, this is not actually nearly as good or as bad of a matchup as we think, or this is not nearly as good or bad of an offense as we think. I think the Panthers call out really, really key. And I too am worried about Fields. Like my initial rankings on Wednesday had Fields, you know, here, wherever I had him. And he's just been going down the list as the week's gone on. Cause it's just frightening. It like is really, really scary. The thought of him without Garrett Wilson this week.
Yeah. Fields to me, and this is something I need to put on a sticky note somewhere when I'm drafting like best ball teams, right? Fields is such a better and best ball quarterback because when you don't have to worry about how you, because there's emotion in this game, right? And when Fields puts up a dud like last week, nobody feels good about playing him the next week.
Right.
But you all know, well, he's probably going to score 20 points because he's going to run for an 80-yard touchdown.
Right.
But mentally, it's so hard for you to capture that. But in best ball, you don't worry about that.
Yeah.
It's not because you don't have to end up putting him in your starting lineup. But every single week, you're looking at Fields in your lineup, be like, do I drop this? Do I drop this guy this week?
And then at the end of the season, he's the QB7 in points per game.
Exactly. So like the roller coaster quarterbacks, I know Kyler Murray's kind of been like this too, where you just never feel confident starting them, but you know that at the end of the season, his total output is going to be a top 12 quarterback. Like draft those guys in best ball where it doesn't matter, you know, when you have to start them, you don't need to be right about it. I think the predictability of it is, or the emotional side of Justin Fields, and maybe it's just him specifically because his passing, his low passing games are just so bad.
Yeah, and the weapons in New York are horrendous, like objectively horrendous. So it's just like it's just compounding that whole idea. Yeah,
for sure.
All right, let's talk about Rashee Rice here because he's returning this week. How do you feel about Rice? Like I've seen some people saying that people are being too aggressive in ranking him and how they're using him this week. And they don't necessarily see like top 10 right away because he's coming off an injury and et cetera, et cetera. How do you view Rice coming back this week, number one? And then how do you think he impacts the rest of the pass catchers and playmakers in that Chiefs offense?
Yeah, I think that he'll have a substantial impact coming back. I know we saw a Jeremy Fowler report that talked about how they're going to be full bore with Rashee Rice. And then somebody asked Andy Reid about it. And he was like, well, you can ask Jeremy about how Rice's snaps are going to play with like tongue in cheek about it, like with a smirk. So like, I think that he's going to play enough to be a usable fantasy asset. I think that I have him in the high end wide receiver 2 range. That's kind of where he is in FantasyPros ECR ranking. So I would say that the ECR is probably pretty aggressive on him. I think that if you have him, like, you're probably going to start him, especially if you've been waiting out this long. I think Yahoo did a poll where they were measuring, you know, what's your record with Rashee Rice? And most people are like 2-4. And I know like specifically, I have a team with Rashee Rice and I am definitely 2-4. So I'm like, I'm ready to put him back into my starting lineup for sure. And I do think that the matchup is pretty good for him against the Las Vegas Raiders. When you look at what he did as a rookie against the Raiders, because he didn't play them last year before his injury, he had double-digit targets in both games against the Raiders. The Raiders run a lot of zone coverage. I know Matt Harmon in his reception perception has talked about how great Rashee Rice is as the Chiefs zone beater. I just think that he's different from every other receiver they have on that team. I mean, like Juju, I guess, is like the closest thing to a Rice type of clone. And then obviously the rookie they drafted, he's been obviously banged up, so they haven't been able to really use him. So I think Rice they could drop him in, and I think he could lead the team in targets. The game script could it's kind of weird against the Raiders because this game looks like, are the Chiefs going to just put up like a 40 burger and just be like, we're back? Like, and so is that why Rice doesn't hit? Is because like the Chiefs are just blowing out the Raiders. So he just has to do enough to be like, hey, I'm back. So I guess kind of that's my expectation for him when it comes to his impact on the other players. I think you've done a good job of outlining this where, I mean, we saw last year, like Travis Kelce's like numbers like tank when Rashee Rice is on the field. So Kelce has been every week just like sell. Just like you got to move off this guy sooner rather than later because I think he's going to be hit the most. Obviously, he has touchdown appeal attached to Mahomes if he's going to be throwing 3 or 4 touchdowns every single week. But besides that, I'm not feeling great about him. I think Worthy's probably the hardest guy to peg because we haven't seen this Worthy with Rice on the field at the same time. We've seen a rookie version of Worthy, very, very raw, where they're still trying to figure out his role. I do think, though, that the Chiefs have kind of shown their hand with they're ready to go back to 2018 with these launch codes and just blast Xavier Worthy down the field. So if Worthy does pay off this week, it's because he is used as a vertical threat, as a pass catcher down the field. But I think that his production is going to definitely be more volatile on a week-to-week basis, especially if Rice is gobbling up all the underneath targets and then the other guys just kind of fade into the background. So I don't think Worthy is totally dead. I kind of want to see at least 1 week of him with Rice because there's a chance that they kind of like are molding all these different pieces together at once because they've been this high-flying attack. We're trying to attack downfield because that's the receivers they've had is like Thornton and Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy, but now they get their underneath zone beater back. Right. So maybe the A-dot comes back a little bit down. So yeah, I mean, I really wish I had all the answers to it because I think it's going to be definitely interesting to see. It's funny because like the first thing, I write a recap every week about every team and like what I was most interested in. The first thing when it was like Chiefs. Okay, so Rashee Rice was back, and here's what happened.
Yeah. I'm to the point where it's like we can definitely make the downside case for Rashee Rice. Like we know he's coming. He hasn't played in a really long time at this point, but the upside case is clearly there too. Like clearly he has like top 5 upside in fantasy, and the wide receiver position overall is such trash in fantasy this year that I could understand someone being really bullish on Rashee Rice. I get that argument for sure. I'm hopeful that we see a decent amount of Rice this week. Definitely worried about Travis Kelce, like you said, and then Xavier Worthy. I don't know, man. I mean, like last year down the stretch, when we saw them sort of like him get better fantasy production and even in the playoffs when he was performing better, his A-dot fell a good bit, and now his A-dot's not necessarily as low, and Rashee Rice being back means that's probably going to, like Rice is going to get a lot of those lower A-dot looks, and that's a little bit scary to your point. It's like the volatility of Xavier Worthy could be there, and it's not like he's been like unbelievable in fantasy even now. So definitely think there's like Rice is the dude, in my opinion, who's going to be the most stable in that offense. This episode is sponsored by DraftKings. There's no better way to get closer to the action with DraftKings Daily Fantasy, the ultimate destination for football fans. New customers can play free for their share of millions in prizes with their first deposit of $5 or more. Download the DraftKings Daily Fantasy app and enter promo code LATEROUND to play free for your share of millions. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 8778-HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777. 18 plus in most states. Eligibility restrictions apply. Ends December 31st. See terms at DraftKings.com/promotions. Now back to the show. Let's talk about the Patriots backfield. TreVeyon Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, both playing out of their minds poorly. Do you think that there is going to be a shift eventually this season where we see less Ramondre and more TreVeyon Henderson?
It depends on if TreVeyon Henderson starts to play well or not. That has kind of been the biggest thing with me. You can get upset. And so I am a Patriots fan. So like I watch a lot of these games like really, really closely. And to me, it's really been not due to lack of usage for TreVeyon. I mean, he's getting around 10 touches a game.
Yeah, he's getting enough work to be able to see what is this guy about.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm not going to like put the blame necessarily like on like the coaching staff. Now, I don't like how they just continue to go back to Ramondre every time he fumbles the ball.
Yeah.
It's becoming like a joke at this point where it's getting ridiculous. But if you just look at the PFF grades for running backs, 3 of the 4 lowest graded running backs are all Patriots running backs.
That's not great. Not great.
So they all have been really bad. So, and you think, okay, well, Antonio Gibson, if he's out of the picture, now it's just a 2-man backfield. Makes literally no difference because they are committed to using at least 2 guys in this backfield because I do think that they don't want Henderson to break down. Like we saw at Ohio State that Henderson was always more effective when he was used in tandem with another running back. We saw it with Quinshon Judkins because when Ohio State overused him with touches, he got hurt and he would get injured. The thing with him is he just hasn't ripped off any of these marquee big plays that we were sold on
right
at Ohio State and in the preseason, right? All he did was just every time he touched the ball, it's like 30-yard game, 15-yard game, 20-yard game. He has like no explosive plays this season, which to me feels like more of an outlier than anything else because we know he's explosive.
Yeah, like it's in there, right?
Yes, we know it's there for him. And it goes back to kind of your point when we're talking about running back efficiency. Like the run blocking is also not there. It has not been a good run blocking unit. The offensive line of the Patriots is not great. It's been better in pass pro than run blocking for sure. And a lot of the reason why it's better in pass pro anyways is because Drake May is playing like Superman. Yeah. So he's definitely covering up a lot of the offensive line woes. I do think that something else that's important to note is in the 2 games that Henderson has the most targets this year, those are the games that the Patriots both lost. So he hasn't really seen as much negative game script as you'd expect because the Patriots have had a really easy schedule. Right. So they've been able to play with more leads than I think most people would have anticipated. And that's not necessarily great for Henderson, who, okay, you want him Patriots down 10, 2-minute drill. They're driving. Let's get him more targets in the passing game. That really hasn't been the case except for those 2 games against the Raiders and Steelers where he had 3 and 6 targets. Yeah. So that's kind of why the receiving hasn't been there as well. So I think right now, if you have Henderson, it's really more of a hold for me. Yeah. I don't think that you want to sell low on him because for the reasons I laid out, it just takes one play for him to kind of get going. I really think that the first time he rips off one of these big explosive plays, I think that's going to start to build him some momentum. And Mike Vrabel was actually talking about how, or it was either Mike Vrabel or someone that talked about one of his press conferences where he thinks that the running backs are running too afraid. Yeah. Because they're afraid to fumble the ball. So they're running they're playing really, really tight. And that's why you're not seeing as many explosive plays because they're afraid about the security. It's like, we can't fumble the ball and they're not running freely. So I think those are some of the issues that the Patriots running backs are kind of dealing with.
I have an issue too with how they're deploying Henderson. They're not really swinging him to the outside very frequently. There's a lot of runs up the gut, especially like last week. I mean, if you look at his like next gen stats chart of his rushes, it's just up the gut over and over. That's not his game. Like they need to get him some swing passes, more wheel routes from a receiving perspective, and even just get him to the outside on runs and give him some outside looks because that's where he can thrive. Like you can't use to me, they're kind of using TreVeyon the same way they'd be using Ramondre, and they're just 2 completely different running backs. You know, it's just not the way that I would have expected them to deploy him. I was really high on Henderson entering the season. There's no doubt, and so I'm upset about how things have gone for a lot of reasons, right? But I think one of them, like if I were to say what I'm frustrated at with what New England's done, I don't blame them necessarily for like giving him the share that they're giving him. Like you just talked, you know, like you said, like his workload isn't like that insane for a rookie running back during the first half of the season. What I do have a problem with is I don't think they're using him to his maximal like skill set. Maybe part of that is the fact that he's been the opposite of what everyone pegged him as from a pass pro standpoint. And so like they just don't want to get him in certain sets and certain plays that would push from the outside because his pass pro is so poor, and they don't want the opposing defenses to see something that's obvious coming their way. But regardless of the reasoning, like get him in space more, let him use that speed and explosiveness, and that's where, like you said, we could hopefully see him thrive. But I kind of agree. It's like let's just give him like all of these rushing metrics. And I actually talked about this in my mailbag episode, but like all of these rushing metrics this time of year, let alone even during a 17-game schedule, they can be very, very skewed by just one big play. And even Ramondre's numbers right now are very skewed by him playing Miami. Like the majority of his rushing yards over expected came in that game against Miami when Henderson was benched, like when he couldn't pick up blitzes or pressure, and his pass pro was horrible. And so like there's just a lot of funkiness going on here. I'm not like overly optimistic at this point. I still think he's a hold, like you said, but I just want them to use him a little bit differently, get him out in space a little bit more, and hopefully we see some of that this weekend. But like you said, probably a positive game script against Tennessee, you would think.
Yeah, probably a 25 carry game for Ramondre.
Yeah, right. Exactly. What about RJ Harvey? Like, are you in sort of the same boat with him? Like, or do you feel differently because the competition for RJ Harvey seems to be there seems to be a bigger barrier for him with J.K. Dobbins versus Ramondre Stevenson?
Yeah, I agree with that statement there where Dobbins is playing well. Like he's been good this year for the Denver Broncos. However, I do feel Harvey has impressed me more than Henderson has, just what he's actually done on the field. So he's been involved a lot as a receiver. I mean, he's been dusting Dobbins as a receiver. He's a 30% target rate per route run. That's top 5 among all running backs. And even when we're getting little sprinkles of Tyler Bidet or Jalen McLaughlin as pass catchers, still Harvey is the guy that has the most running back targets on the Broncos. So I think that's pretty telling of how Sean Payton is using him. And I mean, Sean Payton does this with every single running back he talks about. I know in the broadcast in the London game, he talked about, well, I'm the guy that's holding this guy back. It's like, dude, you say this. It's like you say this about every single player that you draft. It's like, man, if only we get this guy on the field more. It's like, wow, it'd be crazy if you're the guy that controls that. So you can't really take anything Sean Payton says like too legitimate. Again, he knows Harvey's obviously a talented guy. I do think that Harvey has a chance. It's more of an injury thing with him. But I would say Dobbins has a pretty strong track record of not staying healthy for 17 games. Yeah. So when you're going to like comparing Harvey to Henderson, we've already seen it where Gibson's injury didn't unlock anything with Henderson, right? I don't think anything changed. It's more about how he's schematically used in the actual offense. And that doesn't matter. Again, if Ramondre goes down, they're just going to bring up someone from the practice squad to be the hammer. To Henderson. So I don't think that his overall volume is going to change. Whereas if Dobbins does get banged up, well, now you're adding in at least base work for RJ Harvey, along with the receiving. We've already seen him start games for the Broncos this season. So there's already been that opening crevice where it's like, hey, the Broncos view him as a 1B to 1A of J.K. Dobbins. And I mean, yes, you want to continue to play Dobbins while he's healthy and he's being efficient. So I do think that Harvey still has a really high ceiling. And again, we see running backs go down every single week this year. Yeah. So I think that Harvey is definitely a hold, and if not a cheap buy low, because we've seen this before with Dobbins. Like, he has never been a guy that stayed healthy for the entire season, and I would be really excited about Harvey if that were to happen to him, if he were to miss time, because I've liked what Harvey's done on the field so far. We are talked about the pass catching. All he needs a little bit more base work. You get him some red zone usage, and the Broncos actually have a good run blocking unit, unlike the Patriots. So although they're probably viewed kind of similarly in rest of season rankings, I'd much prefer Harvey for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, I mean, look, Harvey, I mean, the difference too is that when Harvey's on the field, they are doing the things that I wish the Patriots would do with TreVeyon Henderson. And, you mentioned his targets per out run rate. Like, that's intent, right? Like, that is, we're trying to get RJ Harvey the ball when he's running these routes. He's had a 30% plus targets per out run rate in each of his last 4 after starting not at, it was like at 7% and 10% to start the season. So good call out there with Harvey being more involved. We got to talk about the Panthers backfield. How do you expect this to go down? Obviously this week might be a little bit different because Chuba's coming off an injury, but like, let's say we're looking at like week 11. I don't know when their bye is, but let's say we're looking at like week 11. How do you see this backfield split looking between Chuba Hubbard and Rico Dowdle?
The Seahawks backfield?
Yeah, right.
I think it's going to be that. Yeah, that's what I think. So I think it's going to be a disaster. Yeah, for fantasy football purposes, because I do think that the Panthers think they have 2 starting running backs on their team, and I don't like when it's a binary case where, well, Rico Dowdle is the man, he's great, and Chuba Hubbard sucks. Because I don't really think that's the case. Both of these guys rushed for over 1,000 yards last year.
They're both solid. Yeah. Yeah.
They're both good running backs. And even this year, look at rushing success rate. So that's kind of taking, I like success rate because it takes out the, large runs as really boosting your yards per carry. It's just like on a down to down basis, is this a good running play or a bad running play? Yeah. And both Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard are top 4 in rushing success rate, just like they were last year. So it's a good problem for the quote unquote real life Panthers to have because, we got 2 good running backs. This is fantastic. Obviously it's a disaster for fantasy football because I do think that when Hubbard is back up to speed, to your point, this week might be a little bit different because he's coming off a calf injury. If they're both healthy, I think it's going to be more of a 50-50 split, and it could be drive by drive. It could be, more situational based. Maybe they liked out a little bit more on third downs. I know that's kind of what we got from like the preseason usage, although Hubbard kind of had like encouraging receiving stuff to
it
start
was
the
so
year.
weird to start the year. Chuba Hubbard I look, I mean, part of this was me being tilted because I mostly faded Hubbard this year, but like the fact that he had 2 garbage time receiving touchdowns in those first 2 games. I'm sitting there watching the games. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me right now that he's just getting these, because like they just came, like he was just happened to be on the field during the 2-minute drill whenever they, were doing what they were doing. And then he gets like the exact same play, really, when he gets that. But now, I mean, I'd be worried that Dowdle's on the field at that point now,
Yeah. So I think it just hurts both guys. I would say straight up, who do I want right now? I think your best bet is just bet on Rico being the guy in terms of maybe Hubbard doesn't come back or maybe he gets re-injured, right? And then you have that ceiling path with Dowdle as just give me the guy who I know is 100% healthy, and that is Rico Dowdle. It's a calf injury, right? And this calf injury was something that he had already re-injured before.
Right.
So it was it was the Patriots game where Hubbard wasn't playing at the end of the game. And on the broadcast, they're talking about, he entered this game questionable with a calf injury and he re-injured it. And that's when he missed the next 2 weeks. And that's all when we obviously saw Rico Dowdle have these monster games. So that's kind of why I'm like, hold on to Rico Dowdle. Just, like one more week if you can, just to make Hubbard prove that he is healthy and back. Because if he comes back, like my calf gets retweaked. These calf Achilles injuries can be really, really weird. Then you're going back to Rico Dowdle as, a bell cow running back that you're obviously super excited to play. So yeah, if both guys are healthy, it seems like it's going to be a disaster. And at the end of the day, it's the Panthers offense too. Yeah. And what is the actual ceiling when they're not playing the Dolphins and Cowboys, right?
Right. Exactly. Let's talk about Cam Skattebo. I think this is one of the more interesting topics in fantasy right now, because obviously the vibes are there for him in the Giants offense. And people get really hyped about it. Like, I'm all for people just like getting really into a player in fantasy football and just wanting to root for him. And then, maybe paying a premium on that just because it's fun. That's fine. But I saw a lot of like, here are the running backs I would take over Cam Skattebo rest of season after that Thursday night game. And it was like 5 running backs, it was like, that's it. It's just these 5 dudes. So where are you at with Skattebo? Do you think he'll come back to earth a little bit? Do you think Tyrone Tracy will be a little bit more involved? Like, how do you look at this Giants backfield at this point?
Yeah, so I had a lot of soul searching after Cam Skattebo's Thursday night game, because in my piece written every week, I talked about Skattebo as a sell high candidate because I thought the vibes are already good. Yeah. clearly, I was a week too early on that. So that was a big L on my part. But a lot of that stemmed from not the player himself, because I remember, I try to write all my thoughts in these articles about how I'm viewing players, and buying and selling can be so market dependent. It's like, well, what are you getting back in return? If this is the value, if this is what the trade market has on this player, like he should be a buy, or now he should be a sell, because like you said, I've seen someone trade CMC for Cam Skattebo. Like those are the types of trades you're potentially getting here. It's like sick. Like, take CMC. like that's what I would do. So I think with Skattebo, and what I was really frustrated about, and even this is going back to like a process standpoint, I didn't necessarily hate the process of talking about him as like a sell high in terms of, well, look at the schedule, right? He's facing the Eagles. It's good defense. He's going to the Broncos this week, and he's facing the Eagles again on the road next week. But then Jalen Carter doesn't play. I'm like, man, if I had known that, I probably wouldn't have been as aggressive as like trying to sell this player as a sell high. And that annoys me that I didn't bring that type of information, where it's like, if Jalen Carter was injured, and even a couple weeks ago, like with Trey Benson too, like there were some rumors that he was like potentially banged up after that Thursday night game, and I didn't read into it enough. And I'm like recommending Trey Benson as a buy low, and then he gets put on an injury reserve, and I'm just like,
I did the same thing with Benson. Yeah.
They
really didn't give us much information on Benson.
No. Really so like I was kicking myself for that too, because I'm like, man, like I want to be, because at the end of the day, I really want to try to be detail oriented and not miss these types of things, especially when it's not like subjective, right? It's like, no, like Jalen Carter is not playing in this game. That means it's like a much better matchup now for Cam Skattebo. So those are things I'm always trying to look at, especially with some of these defensive players and sometimes offensive linemen in this games. Like those stuff aren't talked about nearly as much, especially when the market completely overlooks it. I know last week, for example, the Broncos had one of their starting guards, Ben Powers, like didn't play, and then their offensive, and then they don't run the football effectively. So it's like, is that, was that the reason why they were so inefficient? So just trying to take advantage of things like that. But to Skattebo specifically, yes, the schedule is getting a little bit tougher. I didn't think Tyrone Tracy was going to make much of a difference. Like, he wasn't really a moving needle. If anything, it was just like, well, like, he's also coming back, so maybe that does factor in like a teeny tiny bit. Didn't really make a difference up on Thursday night. But going back to offensive line issues, Giants lost their starting center, John Michael Schmitz, to a concussion on Thursday. So what if he doesn't play? Now, how effective are they running the football? So I think that because he's such he's a 3-down workhorse, I think that there's always going to be a floor with Skattebo, and his prospect profile was pretty fantastic aside from just
crazy production profile.
Aside from just like the general like speed things from him. And I think he was one of these players that I talked about day 2, or he didn't have day 2 draft capital, but if he had day 2 draft capital, he would have been one of like 6 or 7 running backs that was able to enter the year with at least 30 receiving yards per game on his resume. And then the rest of the guys on that list are like Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, Saquon Barkley, Joe Mixon, like all these, Jahmyr Gibbs, like all these like absolute running back studs. Zach Charbonnet is also in there too. And, he probably would be good if he had a backfield to himself. But so that's kind of my take on Skattebo. It's, if you can take advantage of the hype and get someone to really, really overpay, I think it makes sense. But I do think that he is a good player. And even in tougher matchups, maybe they won't be as productive, but I do believe in the talent. And that's kind of why I was also kicking myself on selling him, because I don't like to sell players that I do believe in. Like, I think that he is a good player. So it does depend on like what your return was. And obviously you would have rather be selling now because you're getting definitely a much higher return than you would have before Thursday night.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that you're right. Like it's a volume driven play at this point where I don't know if there's like legit top 5 rest of season ceiling. But I do think that there's going to be a nice floor for sure, for Skattebo. Like he's, I think that what we saw in college and what his production and what his profile in general said is translating. Like really good at breaking tackles, just a maniac on a football field, but also doesn't necessarily have that like explosion, and that his explosive run rate was terrible in college. And so that's all translating in my opinion. It's just that, and I do think that Tyrone Tracy is like a good complement to Cam Skattebo. Like that's a backfield tandem that makes a lot of sense hypothetically. But yeah, I mean, like I have a hard time making the assumption that the Giants offense is just going to wreck like they did last week, every single week. Like we have to at least be moderately like logical and rational about that side too. Teams like, I love Jackson Dart, super love that Jackson Dart. But teams are going to get more film on him. Like they're going to figure him out a little bit more. They're going to contain him a little bit differently. Like there's stuff like that we have to think about too. And they obviously don't have that pass catcher with Malik Neighbors going down. So I like Skattebo. I don't think that he's like an obvious sell just because, like you said, the market's kind of all over the place with him. But if you can sell for like a legit RB1, I think that you should. All right, real quick, we're going to go through like a rest of season, this guy or that guy thing. Okay, you can give me a brief answer. You can just give me the player if you want to too, but I know that you're one that would probably want to give at least some logic. But I'm going to go through a handful of these. I've been doing this on Perspectives. People have seemed to like it. First one, Brian Thomas versus Jalen Waddle.
I will go with Jalen Waddle.
Okay.
Seen it more with Waddle and Tua to be like him as a wide receiver 1 versus Trevor Lawrence and Brian Thomas Jr., which I feel like is still like a work in progress.
Yeah. How about Ashton Genty versus Saquon Barkley?
Genty for me. Give me the young legs. The Raiders somehow have like a decent schedule rest of season for running backs. Mm-hmm. And Barkley has been bad. She's been bad this year. And the Eagles offensive line has issues. The Eagles offense, again, that was almost one of the things I put for surprising stats, although I think that most people believe the Eagles offense isn't good. I'm not sure if people would believe like how bad it's been, because it's been like really bad.
Yeah, it's been not great. Courtland Sutton versus Teteroa McMillan.
Yeah, so Courtland Sutton, I've tried not to have too many takes on him after I called him out as like, so this was a couple years ago. I called him this year's Cooper Kupp after Kupp had his like monster year. This is my first year.
I remember seeing that. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. No, but nobody on Reddit also lets me forget it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Really funny.
I'm sure. Yeah, that's how it goes.
But it was one of those things where it did kind of humble me a little bit and like, hey, understand how things work when you have a hot take. Like, yeah, it's all fun and games when you do it, but then you gotta pay the repercussions if it doesn't work out. So I feel like I've learned and matured from that experience. That being said, so I try to keep my Sutton takes very, very limited. I like the player. But I will go with Tetairoa McMillan here.
Yeah.
I really liked what I've seen from him. Really high floor first 5 weeks of the season. Has the touchdowns last week. And if they turn to Andy Dalton, great. Sign me up.
Sutton's so bizarre because he's literally, if you go look at his target shares, every other week he has a high target share. It's high then low, then high then low. Then it's just there's an inconsistency there that if he doesn't score on those lows like we saw last week, it's rough. Whereas
it's the Bo Nix inconsistency.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just not the I think Sutton's good and fine. It's just hard to if he could only have those peaks, then he'd be great. Kenneth Walker versus Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt.
I'm going to go with Bill here.
Yeah, I think you got to go Bill.
Yeah. I think
that's sad.
He's the RB1 on his team, and Walker is in this committee. Really, we just need one of these guys to just not be as involved, and they would be a hit. The Seahawks love to run the football.
Yeah.
And right now, it pains me every time I look at the box score when it's 10 carries for Kenneth Walker, 8.9 yards per carry.
Yeah.
Charbonnet, 2.2 yards per carry, 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. I talked about it on the show this week too. The Seahawks running backs this year have 16 total targets across the entire season. Christian McCaffrey in week 3 had 15, right? Like that's also the problem is that the issue with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is that he doesn't catch passes, right? Like they're not using him and deploying him as a receiver enough. And he's, seeing these sub 10% target shares week in and week out. And they use Jeremy McNichols in that role, but we're not getting that from Walker and Charbonnet anyway. So there's not even upside from that perspective. Obviously if Charbonnet were to get hurt, I think the answer would be a little bit different, but this is the way it is right now. Drake May versus Baker Mayfield.
I'm going to go with Drake May.
Yeah, I am too.
Yeah.
I mean, look, props to Baker beating my regression allegations so far this season, although he has regressed in touchdown rate a little bit. But he's balling out, man. He's balling out. And here's the tough part. I had Baker as more of a fade this year. Like I didn't think that he was like a great pick at like QB, whatever, 7 or whatever he was. But he's just so fun that I'm not even mad about it. Like he's a really easy guy to root for. But I agree with Drake May here.
Yeah. 100%.
Let's go. Jawan Jennings versus Matthew Golden.
So Jawan Jennings is shaping up to be this year's Michael Pittman he's going to be out there playing through like a broken back and all these injuries.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's like Matt Breida. Remember when Matt Breida would do that for San Francisco? He would just be out there. He'd have like one limb and he's still doing it.
So I don't think we're going to get the same season we got from Jawan Jennings from last year, especially with all the quarterback injuries and who do we know is going to be available for the San Francisco 49ers. By the time Jennings is healthy enough, is Ayuk back? Is Pierce all back?
Yeah.
What is the state of this offense? Who's the quarterback? So I'll just go with Matthew Golden. I like what I've seen from him. I think he looked really impressive. He's looked the part, man. Like he's one of the guys that I feel like Jordan Love, third down. Hey, who's going to catch this?
Yeah. Like obviously Romeo Dobbs is getting his, and it's great and fine. But like I have Golden on and again, one of my Kings Classic lineup, I drafted him, and he's a perfect player to have when you have a really big starting lineup, right? Like you're not trusting Golden when you have 2 wideouts that you're starting and maybe 1 flex or something. But when you have 3 wideouts and 3 flexes, like he's a perfect, has a decent enough floor and then maybe, breaks a big one. And just because the offense is obviously solid. Speaking of that offense, Josh Jacobs or James Cook?
I'm going to go with Josh Jacobs here.
Yeah. Would you have said that 2 weeks ago though?
I don't know. It's close. I actually have them ranked back to back in my rest of season ranking. So this was a good pull for you to pick these 2 guys. I like Jacobs' schedule. Rest of season is one of the top schedules for running backs on the FantasyPros strength of schedule tool. So I like that. And in the Packers, they like to spread the ball between all of these receivers, but when they get to the goal line, we know who's getting the rock. It's Josh Jacobs.
Yep. All right. Last one. You mentioned Michael Pittman. We'll say Michael Pittman versus your Patriots, Stephon Diggs.
Got to buy. Stephon Diggs. Guy got gypped from a 51-yard gain last week on some BS OPI call. So, because I went back, I was so mad about it. I went back and did the math. I added that catch in if it had counted to Diggs's yards per route run this season. So if that catch counts, he's over 3 yards per route run this season.
Yeah, I mean, they're not even deploying him like that much, which is the crazy. Like he's still getting it done for the most part after, a little bit of a hiccup to start the year, just like from a deployment standpoint. But yeah, man, I mean, let's just see what happens with all the trade rumors too. Let me just give you a hypothetical. If Jacoby Myers goes to New England, are you still taking Stephon Diggs over Michael Pittman?
Probably not. I think that would probably move the needle for me, especially if Josh Downs, I know, is dealing with his concussion now that he has a thing, and Pittman is solid. Pittman's been much better. He can finally score touchdowns.
Yeah.
Thank the Lord. Finally, all I needed was Daniel Jones, go figure, for him to finally find the end zone. So I think both players are good. Obviously, Pittman has a strong resume of 150 target seasons. I remember drafting Pittman this year just on the sole purpose of he was like wide receiver 50 and ADP or something.
He's
I'm like
25% target shares every year.
Yeah. I'm just thinking there's not 49 receivers that are better than Michael Pittman. So I'm just going to take him. I just don't believe that. So I think, if everything stays the same in New England, I would go with Diggs here. But if there is a receiver that gets moved, Jacoby does come back to New England, I probably would go with Pittman.
All right. Favorite buy candidate right now?
My favorite buy candidate. So it actually was going to be Stephon Diggs. Like, that's someone that I am really, really excited about. I like this matchup this week against the Titans, 32nd in DVOA against number 1 wide receivers. That's one of the guys I want to buy. I think after the bad week, he's someone that I want to take advantage of. PFF's 6th highest graded wide receiver this season, Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, he's playing well. All right, favorite sell candidate right now?
Travis Etienne. I think that he is screaming sell. Matchups coming up are definitely not great for his production. He benefited earlier in the year from good matchups and a lot of really long runs. Going back to the yards per carry versus rushing success rate type of metric, Etienne still averaging over 5 yards per carry. That looks absolutely fantastic. Success rate is 16th worst in the NFL. It's actually nearly 9 percentage points lower than his backfield teammate, Vishal Tootin, I think that they're kind of keeping in bubble wrap a little bit. He's been on the injury report.
His shoulder like every week. Yeah.
So he's been on the injury report every single week, and then he gets taken off, and then he ends up playing like a handful of snaps here and there. So I don't think that he's 100% healthy. That might change after the Jacksonville Jaguars go on their bye week, which is coming up, I believe, after this week because they're playing in London. So Rams this week in London, then they have their bye. Raiders, been decent against the run, and then the Texans. Like, those are just not great matchups for running backs. So Travis Etienne, I still think that he has enough of that early season production that you can sell him for a decent return. And I love Vishal Tootin. I think that guy is so good. And this is the week where you're starting to see him hit the waiver wire. Knew it was gonna. I knew it was gonna happen because eventually people just get sick of these like hyped up rookies that are like backups and handcuffs. And this is the week that he starts hitting the waivers. So just if he's out there, just scoop him up, just in case.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, he's a high upside handcuff. And if there's an injury that happens to ETN, it's a great run scheme that you want your running back to be playing behind. In, so.
And ETN has done this act before, where starts out the gates red hot, even his best year in 2023, where he was an absolute monster.
That's right.
He fell off in the second half of the season. Like, he does this every single time. He falls off in the second half of the season and fades. So if he starts to fade, I think Tootin could be a big benefactor.
It's a really good point. All right. Last thing I've been asking everyone, bold prediction for week 7.
All right. So this could have been also my buy low player, but I wanted to feature it here in the bold prediction because I feel like that's more emphasis about how I'm excited. I think we're going to see a breakout game from not Rashee Rice, but Isaiah Pacheco. That's who I actually think could be a big game player for the Chiefs this week. With Pacheco, what I've noticed is the snaps have climbed the last 2 weeks. He played 77% of snaps in week 6. He had the majority of red zone carries over Kareem Hunt. And I thought that he looked a lot better. He had 4 explosive runs per next gen stats, rushes of 15 plus yards against the Lions. He had 4 of those combined runs leading up to week 6. If we see this Chiefs offense turn back into a fantasy wagon and they're just scoring 30 points every single week, well, I think it's going to benefit their starting running back. I get that the Chiefs love to throw the football, so Pacheco's going to have to do it through efficiency. And in this specific matchup against the Raiders, I think that there actually is a chance that he can rip off some more big runs. So with Pacheco this year against stacked boxes, he's averaging 7.5 yards per carry, which is 3rd highest in the NFL, 4th highest in success rate. The Raiders lead the NFL in terms of stack box rate. So I know that stack boxes can kind of sound scary for a running back going up against that team. But what it really means is, yes, there's more stuffed runs, but it also means that you make one guy miss then you're gone. Yeah. And then you're off to the races. So Pacheco, the reason he's also kind of like a buy low for me is because, dude, people want nothing to do.
Oh yeah, they're dropping him right now.
Like he's getting, and the state of the running back position, like people are hurting right now. You want to start Zach Charbonnet? Like, you want to start a Texans running back? Yeah. Right. So it's really tough times. And if you can just get Pacheco for a bench wide receiver, Jacoby Myers, and maybe gets traded, like take him. Like, give me a running back that I think actually has a high ceiling. I think he'd have a big week in week 7. And I think they'd be glad that you scooped him up while he was really, really cheap and basically free.
Yeah. Love that call, man. Love this conversation. This is great. Loved having you on. I'm sure people will agree. Let everyone know what you're working on, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So it's Andrew Erickson over at FantasyPros and also at Betting Pros. So that's where I do all of my weekly content from my fantasy football waiver wire, beyond the waiver wire column, where I basically write about every single team, buy low, sell high, trades, waiver ads, breaking down all 32 teams, team by team analysis. And then throughout the week, I have betting articles that come out that feature picks against the spread, my favorite props for every game, anytime touchdown bets, tons of fun. If you just kind of want my perspective on the game from a betting lens, and I throw in some fantasy wrinkles here and there as well, that's over on bettingpros.com. And you can find all of these articles. I tweet them out over on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _, same handle on Instagram, Bluesky, all the socials, even on TikTok. You can find my ugly face up there. On the Fantasy Pro side of things, the Betting Pro side of things, just having fun. Not as good as the kids are at generating the algorithm the best I can, but I do what I can.
Yeah, man. Love it. Make sure you guys are following this podcast, the Late Round Podcast, anywhere you can get your podcast. And subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@LateRoundFF. Thanks for listening, everyone. But more importantly, instead of saying thanks for listening, thanks for tuning in.